My name is Ava Quinn. For the last 6 years, I've worked as the lead archivist for the Charleston Preservation Trust, a job that feels less like a profession and more like a calling. My life is measured in the scent of old paper and leather, in the delicate task of preserving the stories that seep from the very bones of the city. I live in a small, second-story apartment south of Broad Street, where the evening air carries the fragrance of jasmine and salt, and the gas lamps flicker to life at dusk, casting a warm, golden glow on the cobblestones below. I find comfort in order, in history, in the quiet, steady narrative of things that endure. Perhaps that's why I fell in love with Liam. He was the antithesis of my structured world, a musician with a soulful voice and a restless spirit, a man who seemed to live entirely in the present moment. He was all impulse and passion, a beautiful, chaotic melody against the quiet rhythm of my life. I thought we balanced each other. I thought his spontaneity was the perfect counterpoint to my careful planning. For 3 years, I believed our love story was one for the archives, a timeless tale of opposites attracting. We were supposed to be married on a Saturday in early October when the low-country heat finally breaks and the air turns crisp and clear. I had planned everything with the same meticulous care I give to a fragile, 18th-century manuscript. The venue was a historic home with sprawling gardens draped in Spanish moss. The invitations were letterpressed on thick, cream-colored stock. My dress, a simple column of ivory silk, hung in a garment bag in my closet, a silent promise of the future I had so carefully curated. On the Tuesday before the wedding, 4 days before I was to walk down an aisle of fallen oak leaves, Liam called me from his studio. I was at my desk, cataloging a collection of Civil War-era letters, and I answered with a smile in my voice. "Just confirming the string quartet has the final song list," I said, picturing him surrounded by his guitars and amplifiers. There was a pause, a pocket of static-filled silence that felt heavier than it should have. "Ava," he began, his voice strained and distant, "I can't do this." My breath caught in my throat. The letter in my hand, penned by a soldier to his sweetheart in 1864, suddenly felt impossibly heavy. "Can't do what, Liam?" "If it's about the cost of the cellist, we can talk about it." "No, not that." "This. Us," he said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "This whole wedding, this life you've built for us, it's a beautiful cage, Ava, but it's still a cage. I can't breathe. I feel like you've mapped out every single step of my life, and I'm losing myself in your plans." A beautiful cage. The words echoed in the quiet of my office, a cruel distortion of everything I thought I was building. I had planned our wedding not to control him, but to create a perfect day to celebrate our love. I had looked at houses not to trap him, but to build a home for the family we had talked about starting. "Liam, what are you saying?" I whispered, my own voice sounding foreign and small. "I'm saying it's over. I'm sorry, Ava. I truly am. But I can't marry you. I need to find my own path, and I can't do that when you've already paved one for me." The line went dead. I sat there, phone in hand, staring at the faded ink of a 150-year-old love letter. The soldier had written of his longing for home, of his unwavering devotion. My own love story had just been declared a forgery. The silence in my apartment that evening was profound, a heavy, suffocating blanket. Every detail of our wedding, the calligraphed place cards on the dining table, the stack of RSVP cards filled with well wishes, the non-refundable tickets for our honeymoon in the Scottish Highlands, was no longer a symbol of our future. It was an artifact from a history that had never happened. The shock was a cold, creeping numbness, but beneath it, a question began to form, a slow, painful unfurling. Had I been so busy archiving our love story that I failed to read the fine print? Our story began, as many do in Charleston, on a humid summer evening under the broad arms of a live oak. I was at an outdoor concert at a local brewery, dragged there by my best friend, Sophie. I was never one for crowds, but Sophie insisted I needed a life outside the hushed halls of the Preservation Trust. And then Liam stepped onto the stage. He had a worn acoustic guitar and a voice that was both raw and gentle, a sound that seemed to hold all the melancholic beauty of the Low Country itself. Our eyes met for a fleeting moment across the sea of faces, and I felt a jolt, a current of recognition that I couldn't explain. Sophie, ever the catalyst, marched me up to him after his set. "My friend Ava thinks you have the voice of a sad, "Handsome angel," she announced, and I wanted the ground to swallow me whole. But Liam just laughed, a warm, easy sound, and his gaze settled on me with an intensity that made me feel seen in a way I hadn't realized I was hiding. The first year was a whirlwind of stolen moments and quiet discoveries. We'd walk along the Battery at dawn, watching the shrimp boats head out to sea. He'd write songs inspired by the stories I told him from the archives. I, in turn, found a strange beauty in the chaos of his life. The late-night gigs, the ever-changing tour schedules, the way he never seemed to own a matching pair of socks. He told me I was his anchor, the steady hand that kept his ship from drifting. I thought it was romantic. I didn't realize he saw an anchor as something that held him in place. Sophie saw it, though. Sophie, with her fierce loyalty and her uncanny ability to see through pretense, had been my other half since we met in college. We had navigated our 20s together, a pact of mutual support and shared dreams. She owned a small, beloved bookstore called The Story Keeper, a cozy haven of worn paperbacks and sleepy cats. She knew me better than anyone, which is why she was the first to see the hairline fractures in my relationship with Liam. "Does it ever bother you that he talks about freedom so much?" she asked me one afternoon over tea, a few months after Liam and I had moved in together. "It's like he's constantly reminding you he has one foot out the door." "He's an artist, Soph," I'd replied, a little too defensively. "He needs to feel untethered. It doesn't mean he doesn't love me." The real rift between Sophie and me came about a year before the wedding. Liam had been offered a 3-month residency in Nashville. I was thrilled for him, but also anxious about the distance. When I tried to talk to him about how we'd manage it, he grew distant and accused me of trying to hold him back. A few days later, he came to me, his expression a careful mask of hurt and concern. "I don't want to upset you, Ava," he'd said, taking my hands in his, "but I need to tell you something." I was talking to Sophie about the residency, just getting her perspective, and she said some things. She said that maybe this was a sign that we weren't compatible, that maybe I needed someone who understood the artist's life better. The words struck me like a betrayal. I couldn't imagine Sophie saying something so cruel, so dismissive of my love for Liam. But Liam was so convincing, his pain so seemingly genuine. "She thinks I'm clipping your wings," I whispered, horrified. "I told her she was wrong," he'd said, pulling me into a hug. "I told her you were my wings. But I just thought you should know. I don't want anyone, not even your best friend, trying to come between us." I was so consumed by my love for him, so desperate to prove that our relationship was strong enough to withstand anything, that I didn't question his story. I called Sophie, my voice shaking with a hurt I now know was entirely misdirected. The conversation was short and devastating. I accused her of being jealous, of trying to sabotage my happiness. She was stunned into silence, then tried to explain, her voice pleading. "Ava, that's not what happened." He twisted my words. "I was just worried about you." But I wouldn't listen. In my blind devotion to Liam, I chose him over the friend who had been my anchor for a decade. I told her I needed space, and the silence that followed was a chasm that I had created myself. We didn't speak again for almost a year. And 4 months after I pushed Sophie away, Liam proposed on a starlit beach, telling me he knew, after almost losing me, that he couldn't live without me. I now see that the proposal wasn't a declaration of love. It was a strategic move to secure his anchor after he'd successfully cut the rope to my only other lifeline. The wedding planning became my solace, my way of proving to myself and the world that we were solid, that our love was a tangible thing that could be organized into timelines and seating charts. I didn't see that I was building a beautiful facade around an empty foundation. And Liam, it seemed, was happy to let me, right up until the moment he decided to walk away and leave me in the ruins. The first few days after the phone call were a blur of logistics and quiet humiliation. I moved through the tasks of cancellation like an automaton. With each call, to the caterer, the florist, the string quartet, I had to repeat the same sterile phrase, "The wedding has been called off." The words felt like sandpaper in my throat. My mother's heartbroken sobs and my father's gruff, angry questions were a painful symphony on speakerphone. My younger brother, Finn, drove up from Savannah and just sat with me in silence for an entire afternoon, a quiet, steady presence that I was deeply grateful for. But it was a call I made on Thursday that finally cracked through my numbness. I was canceling the stone cottage we had rented for our honeymoon in the Scottish Highlands. The owner, a kindly woman named Mrs. Baird, listened patiently to my story. "Och, I'm so sorry to hear that, dearie," she said, her Scottish brogue a comforting balm. "It's a terrible thing to have your heart broken." I thanked her and was about to hang up when she added, "It's a bit strange, though. Your young man called me himself just yesterday." My hand froze on the phone. "He did? What did he say?" "Well, he was asking about our cancellation policy," she explained. "Wanted to know if the deposit could be refunded if the booking were to be canceled within a week of the arrival date." I told him it was non-refundable, as stated in our agreement. He seemed quite put out about it. Yesterday. Liam had called her yesterday, a full day before he had called me to end our engagement. The timeline clicked into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't a last-minute panic. This wasn't a sudden, overwhelming fear of commitment. This was a calculated, premeditated act. While I was finalizing the wedding favors and writing my vows, he was researching cancellation policies, trying to mitigate his own financial losses before delivering the emotional blow to me. He hadn't just broken my heart, he had done a cost-benefit analysis on it first. The realization ignited something within me, a slow-burning anger that was sharper and more clarifying than grief. The narrative he had spun, that I was the one who was suffocating him with my plans, was a lie. He was the one who had been planning all along, orchestrating his own exit with a cowardice that was breathtaking. That evening, I sat at my dining table, staring at the 2 non-refundable, round-trip tickets to Inverness, Scotland. They had cost nearly $3,000. They represented a future that was now defunct, a ghost trip for a ghost marriage. I could let them expire, another casualty of Liam's betrayal. Or I could rewrite the story. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through my phone's contacts, my thumb hovering over a name I hadn't dared to touch in almost a year, Sophie. The guilt was a heavy weight in my chest, a palpable ache for the friend I had so wrongly discarded. Swallowing my pride, a pride that now seemed so foolish and misplaced, I pressed the call button. She answered on the second ring, her voice cautious. "Ava." Tears I hadn't allowed myself to cry finally welled in my eyes. "Sophie," I began, my voice cracking. "I am so sorry. You were right about him. You were right about everything, and I was a blind, stubborn fool for not listening to you." There was a long pause, and in it, I braced myself for anger, for an "I told you so," for the cold shoulder I so richly deserved. Instead, her voice came back, soft and full of a grace I hadn't earned. "Oh, Ava, what happened? Are you okay?" Through hiccuping sobs, I told her everything. The phone call, the beautiful cage, and the final, crushing discovery about his call to Mrs. Baird. She listened without interruption, her silence a comforting presence that reached across the miles and the months of our estrangement. "He's a coward, Ava," she said finally, her voice laced with a quiet fury on my behalf. "He couldn't handle being with a woman as strong and capable as you, so he tried to make you feel like your strengths were a weakness. That's on him, not you." Her words were a lifeline. "I miss you, Soph," I whispered. "I miss you so much." "I miss you too," she said, and I could hear the tears in her voice now. "I've missed you every day." We sat in a shared, healing silence for a moment before I took a deep breath and plunged ahead with the wild, impulsive idea that had been forming in my mind. "This is going to sound completely insane," I said, "but I have 2 non-refundable tickets to Scotland. For a trip that's supposed to leave on Saturday. The day of the day that's not happening anymore." Sophie was quiet. I was thinking, I continued, the words gaining momentum, that maybe instead of sitting here in Charleston surrounded by wedding decorations and ghosts, I could go somewhere else. "And maybe you'd want to come with me? We could call it a friendship honeymoon." The silence on the other end stretched, and for a heart-stopping moment, I thought I had pushed too far, asked for too much too soon. But then I heard it, a small, surprised laugh. "A friendship honeymoon?" she repeated, the amusement growing in her voice. "Ava Quinn, are you asking me to run away to Scotland with you on what was supposed to be your wedding day?" "I am," I said, a smile breaking through my tears. "Think of it. Misty moors, cozy fires, single malt whiskey, and no cowardly musicians in sight." Her laughter filled my ear, a sound as warm and familiar as the scent of old books in her store. You know, she said, her voice full of a light I hadn't heard in a year. That sounds like the most beautifully insane, absolutely perfect plan I've ever heard. Count me in. As we started to make plans, my heart, which had felt like a shattered piece of porcelain, began to feel like something else entirely, a compass, finally pointing me back in the right direction. The knock on my apartment door came late Friday afternoon, less than 24 hours before our flight. I knew it was Liam before I even looked through the peephole. My heart gave a nervous flutter, but it wasn't the old, familiar ache of longing. It was the sharp, alert thrum of a woman preparing for battle. I opened the door. He looked smaller than I remembered, his usual artistic dishevelment now appearing just messy. His eyes were shadowed with a fatigue that I suspected was born more of self-pity than sleeplessness. "Ava," he said, his voice low and practiced. "Can I come in? We need to talk." I didn't move from the doorway. My suitcase, packed not with a wedding trousseau, but with hiking boots and warm wool sweaters, stood sentinel in the hallway behind me. "There's nothing to talk about, Liam. You made your position perfectly clear." He flinched, clearly unaccustomed to this new, firm version of me. "I know I hurt you. I handled it badly. I was scared, and I panicked." "You didn't panic, Liam," I said, my voice calm and even, a stark contrast to the storm of emotions I'd felt just days ago. "You planned. You called the guest house in Scotland to check on the deposit before you even called me. Panic is impulsive. What you did was calculated." The color drained from his face. He had come here expecting tears, pleading, a scene. He had not come expecting facts. "How did you?" "It doesn't matter how I know," I interrupted. "It just matters that I do. The narrative you tried to sell me, that I was the controlling one, the one building a cage, it was a lie to absolve you of your own cowardice. You can't stand here and pretend this was a moment of weakness." He ran a hand through his hair, his signature gesture of tortured artistry. It looked theatrical now, a hollow pose. "Okay, you're right. I should have been more honest. But Ava, this is crazy. Your mom told me you're still going on the trip. You can't go on our honeymoon alone." "I'm not," I said, and I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. "I'm going with Sophie." If I had slapped him, the look on his face could not have been more stunned. He stared at me, his mouth slightly agape, as his brain tried to process the information. "Sophie? But you too. I thought you weren't speaking." "We're speaking now," I said. "It turns out that when you remove the manipulative liar from the equation, friendships have a remarkable ability to heal." His shock quickly curdled into a desperate, proprietary anger. "You can't take her on our honeymoon. That's our trip, our place." "It's my trip now," I corrected him gently. "I paid for the tickets. And it's not your place. It's just a place. And I'm choosing to fill it with joy and friendship instead of the memory of your betrayal." "This is about revenge, isn't it?" he accused, his voice rising. "She's convinced you to do this to punish me." I almost laughed. How small his world was, that he thought every action revolved around him. "No, Liam. This isn't about you at all. That's the part you don't understand. This is about me. It's about me remembering who I was before I spent 3 years trying to make myself smaller to fit into your life. It's about rebuilding a friendship that is more honest and valuable than anything we ever had." He looked around my apartment, at the boxes of wedding gifts now stacked for return, at the absence of his guitars in the corner, and a flicker of genuine panic finally lit his eyes. This was real. He was losing control. "Ava, please," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Don't do this. Let's just take some time. When you get back, we can talk, we can figure it out. I still love you." I looked at him, really looked at him, and I felt nothing but a profound, quiet pity. He didn't love me. He loved the idea of me, the steady, organized woman who made his chaotic life easier. He loved his anchor, and he was terrified to find himself adrift. "No, Liam," I said, the word a final, gentle closing of a book. "There is no when I get back. You wanted to find your own path. I suggest you start walking." I began to close the door. He put a hand out to stop it, his face a mask of disbelief. "You're just going to throw away 3 years? You threw them away on Tuesday," I said softly. "I'm just cleaning up the mess." I closed the door on his stunned face, turned the deadbolt, and leaned against the cool wood. There was no triumph, no surge of vengeful pleasure. There was only the clean, quiet, and deeply satisfying feeling of a final page being turned. I had a flight to catch. My new story was waiting. The air in Scotland smelled of damp earth, peat smoke, and something ancient and wild. As the plane descended into Inverness, I looked out the window at the rolling hills, a patchwork of deep greens and moody purples under a sky the color of soft gray wool. It was a landscape that felt like a reflection of my own heart, a little bruised, a little weathered, but vast and full of a rugged, enduring beauty. Sophie and I navigated the rental car and the winding, single-lane roads with a sense of giddy adventure. We got lost twice, laughed until we cried at our attempts to understand the thick Highland accents, and blasted a playlist of defiant, joyful songs with the windows down, letting the cool, clean air wash over us. By the time we arrived at the stone cottage near Loch Ness, the sun was setting, casting long, dramatic shadows across the water. The cottage was perfect. It was small and cozy, with a fireplace, a collection of worn plaid blankets, and windows that looked out onto the still, dark loch. Mrs. Baird had left us a bottle of whiskey and a loaf of fresh-baked bread with a note that read, "Here's to mending hearts and new adventures." That first night, we sat by the fire, sipping whiskey and talking for hours. We didn't just rehash the drama with Liam. We excavated the foundations of our own friendship. We talked about the hurt and the misunderstanding, the words left unsaid, the apologies owed. I told her how deeply I regretted not trusting her, and she told me how much she had missed having her person to talk to. It was a conversation that was both painful and profoundly healing, like setting a bone that had been broken for a long time. "You know," Sophie said, swirling the amber liquid in her glass, "in a weird way, he gave us a gift. He forced us to find our way back to each other." I smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire or the whiskey. A very expensive, emotionally devastating gift, but a gift nonetheless. The next morning, on what would have been the first full day of my married life, I woke up feeling not a trace of sadness, but a sense of profound peace. Sophie was already in the kitchen, making coffee, her face lit by the soft morning light filtering through the window. "I was thinking," she said, handing me a steaming mug, "we should document this." "All of it?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, let's take pictures." "Let's post them," she said, a mischievous glint in her eye. "Let's show everyone, including a certain cowardly musician, what it looks like to choose joy over heartbreak." The idea felt both terrifying and exhilarating. My social media was a curated, quiet space, much like my life had been. But the thought of reclaiming that space, of filling it with our own narrative of strength and friendship, felt like a powerful act of defiance. Our first post was a photo of us, bundled in sweaters and scarves, grinning like fools on the shores of Loch Ness. I wrote a simple caption, "Sometimes the path you're on crumbles," only to reveal a much more beautiful one you never would have found otherwise. So grateful for this friend and this view. #friendship honeymoon, #Scotland. I didn't tag Liam. I didn't have to. The response was immediate and overwhelming. A flood of comments and messages poured in from friends, family, and even old acquaintances. They were messages of love, support, and admiration. "This is the best plot twist ever," one friend wrote. "So proud of you for turning pain into something so beautiful," wrote another. My aunt commented, "I never liked him anyway." Reading them with Sophie, I felt buoyed by a community I hadn't realized was watching so closely, a chorus of voices cheering me on. We were no longer just two friends on a trip, we were the protagonists of a story that people were rooting for. Over the next few days, we turned the Highlands into our playground. We hiked through misty glens, explored crumbling castles, and took a boat tour on the loch, searching for Nessie with childlike enthusiasm. We posted photos of our muddy hiking boots, our whiskey-tasting scorecards, and a selfie with a very hairy Highland cow. Each post was a small stone laid on the foundation of my new life, a declaration that my happiness was not dependent on a man, a ring, or a plan. The turning point came on our last evening. We were sitting by the fire again, feeling a comfortable, happy exhaustion from a long day of exploring. I felt moved to write something more. It wasn't for Liam, not really. It was for myself, and for anyone else who had ever been made to feel that their love was a cage. I posted a photo of the quiet loch at dusk, the water like dark, polished glass. The caption was longer this time. For a long time, I believed that love meant building a safe, predictable home for someone else. I was told my care was a cage, my planning a form of control. This week, in this wild and beautiful place, I've learned something profound. The strongest home isn't one you build for another person, it's the one you build inside yourself. It's a home built of resilience, self-respect, and the fierce, unwavering love of a true friend. It's a home with no cages, only open doors. And I am finally, beautifully, home. I hit post and felt a sense of release, as if I had finally put the right words to my story. A few hours later, as Sophie and I were packing our bags, a notification popped up on my phone. It was a comment on my post. From Liam. It read, "Ava, this is getting ridiculous. You're making a spectacle of our private life. We need to talk when you get home. This isn't you." I showed the phone to Sophie. She read the comment and then looked at me, a slow, knowing smile spreading across her face. "Oh, I think he's wrong," she said. "This is the most you've ever been." I looked at his words again. This isn't you. He was still trying to define me, to control my narrative, to pull me back into the box he had created for me. But I didn't live there anymore. With a sense of calm clarity, I typed a reply. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I simply wrote, "You're right about one thing, Liam. This isn't the me you knew. And I am so incredibly grateful for that." Then, I did something I should have done a long time ago. I blocked him. The flight home was quiet. Sophie slept most of the way, her head resting on my shoulder. I looked out the window at the endless expanse of clouds below and felt a sense of profound peace. I was returning to Charleston not as a jilted bride, but as a woman who had found her way back to herself. The heartbreak was real, but the healing had been more powerful. The story didn't end when the plane landed. In many ways, it was just beginning. Sophie and I were inseparable, our friendship now forged in the fire of shared experience and stronger than ever. I poured my renewed energy into my work at the Trust, finding a new passion for the stories of strong, resilient women in Charleston's history. I never heard from Liam directly again. I heard through the grapevine that he moved to Nashville, still chasing his dream, still, I imagined, searching for a path that required no commitment. His absence in my life was no longer a void, it was a quiet, open space that I filled with art, with work, with laughter, and with the steady, unwavering presence of a friend who had seen me at my worst and helped guide me back to my best. Sometimes, when I'm walking home at dusk and the gas lamps begin to flicker, I think about the beautiful cage he accused me of building. He was wrong. It was never a cage. It was a home. And I had simply, finally, learned that I was the only person who needed to live in it.